look what we had done. And I found John Gardner's name among many of the speakers that have been at the conference in the past. And I thought, I really want some of those people to come back, see where we are now, talk to us about what they know of our organization, which John knows a lot about, and he's actually going to tell you some of our history. But then somebody who has been working in transfer for so long and really has an institutional knowledge. We talked about empathy yesterday. We talked about a lot of things that serve you, obviously, in your roles, but then things that you can take and bring to other people. And this is really what John does best, is he brings his knowledge to the masses, and I am so excited to introduce him. So John, do you want to come up and take it away? All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Sorry if I stand here? Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, no, good morning, folks. A New England morning? Yes, well, I'm glad to be here. This is my second visit to this meeting. The previous one, I honestly don't remember what year it was. Was anybody at the Woodstock meeting? It was in this century, okay? But that's, I don't mean Woodstock, New York, the famous, rock festival. I had a brother who went to that, and I remember I happened to be home then, and he came home after it. My God, the guy was caked head to foot with mud, and lots of tales that he wouldn't tell. But anyway, this is in Woodstock, Vermont, okay? And I'll share with you a memory I have of that. And I too want to thank Carolyn. She has been wonderful to plan this with. It's amazing. If you answer your email promptly and thoroughly, and you return calls, it's a lot easier in life. It's just really stick with the basics. But I've learned she can do a lot more than the basics. She has an MFA. She's a creative writer. She knows how to write. I wish more of our students knew how to write. And she's lived this experience. She's a recovering former transfer student. Okay. And she started at a very good liberal arts college, which will remain nameless. And then she went also to a very good public R1 flagship university, which will also remain nameless, that they still call the main campus. Shame on them. But anyway, it's been a pleasure working with her. And I'm sure you'll find other things, other leadership opportunities for her, won't you? Yes, I'm sure you will. Yes, that was, I think, unanimous. I should say also that I'm not a stranger to Burlington. My wife and I have been coming here every year except the COVID 2 years since 2000. And we stay about 10 miles south of here on the lake on a property that's owned by a nonprofit organization. And the nonprofit organization was founded by one of the descendants of a man and a woman who built an estate on a 1,500-acre piece of property, and their name was Webb. And Mrs. Webb was one of the 11 children of Mr. Vanderbilt, who built the Vanderbilt Mansion in Asheville, North Carolina, and who had the famous American landscape architect, Frederick Law Olmsted, design the landscaping for the Biltmore Estate, which is the largest privately owned home in the United States. I live right outside Asheville, that's how I know this. And but Olmsted also did the landscape design for this place just south of Burlington. It's called the Inn at Shelburne Farms, and it is my favorite place in the world for a vacation. So, and not only that, but the whole area. And we're coming here for a week in last week of August. For instance, they don't have televisions in this place. They made a concession to modernity about 5 years ago. They finally provided internet. But the reception, you really can't use your cell phones. There's just no reception out there, so you can unplug. Anyway, this is a great place to be. I'm glad you decided to come here, and I know Carolyn was relieved to see all of you. And I have been given a remote, and here it is. And let's see if I can do this. I'm a low-tech guy. Whoa, there we are. There's the 50th anniversary cake. And I do want to talk about anniversaries, so I will. There are many things one can do on anniversaries, but I think thematically they are for reflections, and they're for celebrations, And we know that sometimes people, when they celebrate anniversaries, they give gifts, okay? And I'm sure you've been giving each other gifts here. Information, fellowship, affirmation, appreciation, lots of ways to give gifts. And those are all free. We got to remember that. The most important things for students are the free things we can give them. And I think it's time for, anniversaries are time for resolutions. And I'm curious about whether or not this organization, on the occasion of its 50th birthday, will make any resolutions. I'm going to invite them to make at least one resolution. I'm not going to write the script for that, although I could, but I'm not going to. They should do that. So let's talk about reflections for a minute, okay? We could be asking, where have you come from in 50 years? Who were your founding mothers and fathers? Are any of them here? And let's ask that. Do we have any of the founding mothers and fathers? Not one. I wonder if they're still with us. This was 1972. My table, one of the wise people there was trying to remember something that happened in 1972, and he mentioned my favorite female jazz singer, Roberta Flack. Okay? Now, what else happened in 1972? Do you remember? Well, we elected Richard Nixon for the second time, and he promised to end the war in Vietnam. And as a Vietnam veteran, I will tell you, he did not end the war in Vietnam. He expanded it. I was a psychiatric social worker in the Air Force. Talk about memories. Anyway, but he only was president another 2 years, as you know. So maybe you should look into where your founding mothers and fathers are. How about, Chairman Mao used this phrase, long marchers. And I guess this is an educated enough audience, I can quote a communist. When I said, but how many of you are long marchers? You've been with the association for you would think a long time. You were at the Woodstock meeting, you said. That's got to be a long time, all right? That doesn't mean you and I are any older. It just means we've been in the association for a long time. Okay, well, I looked at your participants list and I counted 39 of you are first timers. Put up your hands. Okay, welcome first timers, that's, the concept of first time, I love it. It's an occasion for all kinds of reflections. Okay, now the rest of you by definition are veterans. How many of you have been to more than 2 or 3 of these? Okay, more than 5, more than 10. Anybody been coming as long as 20 years? This woman here, who are you? Now, not to point you out, if my wife were here, she would say, John, you just violated her privacy. But I'm not going to violate your dignity. Wow, 1987. Okay. You remember who was president then? Sure you do. He's unforgettable. Our only grade B movie actor that ever made it into the White House, Ronald Reagan. Okay. Oh, no, yeah. Oh, so you remember Ronald Reagan. Okay, you can admit that. Some people in here, I don't know, they may not have been alive when Ronald Reagan was president. Okay. All right, so reflections on where you've come as an organization, where the organization is now. In the larger context, what's the state of transfer in New England? You are the only multi-state regional transfer organization in the United States. Only one, okay? And on top of that, you're the only transfer organization that has a geographic focus. Most of them are state organizations. It's been around for 50 years. That's really quite an accomplishment. And as a reflection, where could or should you be going as an organization that serves a distinct region in the United States? And New England is truly distinct, as I know well, and I'll tell you why in a minute. So there are no other regional, I'm supposed to advance this thing, there are no other regional transfer organizations that I know of. So I'm wondering, are you primarily reacting to the trends in New England transfer To what extent are you trying to shape them and channel them? And if you were to aspire to do that, who would you need in the room with you? Years ago, my president at the University of South Carolina asked me to run a special summer program for kids who'd been adopted by the Urban League. And this president promised the local president of the Urban League that he would do something for these children. And that gave me the privilege to hear the late Vernon Jordan, who was a senior leader of the Urban League. He went on and became a senior counsel to President Clinton, very, very highly regarded lawyer. And he was the man who arranged a job for Monica Lewinsky. He said in this speech that I heard him, and I've never forgot it, he said, if you ain't in the room, you ain't part of the action. And what we're trying to do for more students today, ladies and gentlemen, is get them in the room, okay? And colleges and universities in New England were not designed to get most people in the room. They were designed to be very exclusive and keep most people out of the room, okay? Which is why the mission you have for transfer is so important, okay? Is your work in any way predictive? Or are you knowledgeable of what I would call, and not original with me, the canary in the mine shaft? Are you seeing indicators, signals of things that the people whom you work for way up the channel need to be aware of? Okay, so the trends, what could you be doing to stimulate them? You celebrated last night? Did you celebrate last night? I heard you had a beautiful view from the admissions office at Champlain College. That was part of what Carolyn planned for you, I know. And you're not going to coast on your laurels, right? Okay. I put together a list of the possible gifts you could be giving. Information, encouragement, support, affirmation, models for effective practices. I went to the session this morning about that. New partnerships. I'm not sure what you're doing in that, but no organization can have too many new partnerships. Friendships. The one I'm most interested in. Big ideas. Big ideas. The people with big money today, the foundations, they are looking for the big ideas. You got to have some big ideas. You got to be knocking on some foundation doors to do some things for New England. It could be done through this association. But if you're going to do that, they want to know what your big ideas are. Okay, now let's put New England in a historical perspective, if I may. There we are. Okay, so 7 years ago, as I say on the slide, we celebrated the 50th anniversary of the Higher Education Act of 1965. That act was passed in a Democratic Congress, the same Congress that adopted the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, which the Supreme Court has subsequently gutted in recent years, and Medicare. Okay, and almost nobody of any political persuasion in this country wants to get rid of Medicare. Okay, yeah, but it was, you can't imagine this. It was so controversial at the time it was adopted. All right, so but the Higher Education Act is really what fueled transfer. Okay, and this act has to be renewed every year by Congress. It has to be reauthorized, and let's hope they never, refuse to do this. So that act made possible a huge expansion of New England higher education. You know what that one act did that made it possible for most of you in this room to have your jobs? I know you didn't think you're coming to a history seminar, did you? Okay, you know what Title IV is, right? Title IV is Title IV of the Higher Education Act, okay? And that provides the federal funding for a significant proportion of your students to be able to go to college, okay? And once that happened, you didn't have the capacity in New England. You were the biggest exporter of students in the country because there weren't enough places in New England for the college students that then wanted to come to college. And so those college students were leaving New England and they were going to Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, and you exported them in the hundreds of thousands, okay, until this happened. And when that happened, you began to expand public higher education in New England. And that created the need for transfer, okay? So the status from 1636 until 1965 was that you're still a net exporter of students, but you were the biggest by far. But that what you've done here since then is you've created an ecosystem of which transfer is an essential piece of that. The question is, how well is transfer working? And what would it take to be more effective in the design of that? Now, this year, I am celebrating a 50th anniversary, not with my third wife, I would want you to know. We're doing well, though. We've been into it about 22 years, and I hope we can make it another 22 years. Her name is Betsy Barefoot. Some of you know her and her work. Google her. She's not well, there's a woman of ill repute who's on the internet of the same name, but this is the one that's a higher educator. Okay, so anyway, this is the 50th anniversary for me of University 101. You know what University 101 is? The freshman year experience. How many of you all have, you probably all have a college success course, right? A student success course, University 101. Okay, that was created 50 years ago today. And it was, not today, excuse me, it was 50 years ago. It started in August of 1972. And it started because of a riot in May of 1970 when the United States invaded. We were like Mr. Putin then. We didn't call it an invasion. We called it a incursion. You know, major governments invent words to conceal the realities of what they're doing, okay? But that was a trigger for student protests, a number of them here in New England, particularly at the elite private institutions in New England. And on my campus, the University of South Carolina, that was a major riot. And the president was barricaded in his office. He came out and he held a press conference and he said, I've learned from this that the students are angry. You know, they set his building on fire. You bet they were angry. And he said, you know, they didn't come in angry. What's happened to them? And what would we want to do to produce students who weren't angry? So ladies and gentlemen, what do presidents do when they got a big problem and they don't know how to solve it? What's your president do when she has a big problem and doesn't know how to solve it? What does he or she do? I think I heard form a committee. That's right. Okay. And not only do we do that on campuses, we do that as a nation with our presidential commissions, the results of which are almost always ignored. Okay. But this presidential committee that got put together created a course to teach students to love the university. Okay. Now think about that. You know, one of the things about human beings is we can teach people to do anything we want them to do. Anything, you name it. In the Air Force, I was taught to kill. Okay. As a matter of fact, one time I had a student who, my first class, I had this student who challenged me. I'd gone over my syllabus and I asked if there were any questions. And this big guy, actually he was sitting in the front, he put up his hand, he said, yeah, I want to know what you think of us having to have, and he used the N-word in this class. I thought, whoa, here's my whole class right here. You can lose it right now. And I said, you know, I didn't hear you. Would you want to repeat your question? I frowned at him. I thought he wouldn't ask the question again, but he did. Repeated it exactly. He said, okay, I heard you this time. And let me tell you, you've just violated the norms I laid out in the syllabus about in-class discussion, how we're going to respect each other, be civil and polite to each other, and you won't do that again. I said, do you understand? He said, yes, sir. I said, does anybody else have any questions? He put his hand up again. He said, I want to know what you think of us having to have the N-word in this class. And I said, I heard you this time. And let me tell you something. I'm an Air Force trained killer. And you're going to get up and you're going to walk out of this room, or I am going to bodily eject you out of this room. I was bluffing. I didn't know what the hell I was going to do, okay? I was going to ask for help if that plan. But he got up and he walked out. Now, my point is, you can train anybody to do anything. You can also train students, educate students, prepare students to love the institution. And to the extent that some institutions do that, they're much less likely to do it for transfer students. That's one of the many things that transfer students get cheated out of. I think eventually we're going to see a class action lawsuit somewhere organized by some transfer students because they're getting screwed. Okay. When I was in the Air Force, I worked for a psychiatrist. I was his psychiatric social worker, and he had all kinds of sayings. I got a book coming out this fall. I'm going to publish some of those things. But one of his sayings was, the screwing you get isn't worth the screwing you get. Okay? And I have to ask that about transfer students, okay? Because I think that explains why a lot of them are not completing. I'm going to talk to you later in this talk, I really do have a talk prepared, about the two types of students we have in the United States and their differences. And those two types are, this woman is one type. She is a transfer student. She will be a transfer student for the rest of her life. She's going to take that to her grave, okay? It's who she is. It helped form her identity and helped her make decisions about the rest of her life. And then there's me. I didn't know transfer students had been invented. They weren't any of them in the college I went to, all right? So she and I are fundamentally different, even though we both started in a small private liberal arts college outside New England, but I finished there and she didn't, okay? Another thing that makes us different, but we also have some commonalities. So anyway, University 101, 50 years old this year, we're still teaching students to love the university, and we're amazingly successful at it. We have stunning differences in our retention rates between the students whom we teach to love the university and those we don't teach to love the university, okay? And our highest performing students of all the different types of students you could imagine coming into a first year at an R1, a public flagship, are Black students, okay? The differences between where they are as seniors and where they were when they started, they have learned to belong. Belonging is one of the most important outcomes of college. And that's a challenge. How do you make transfer students feel like they belong? How intentional are you at doing that, okay? That's really worth thought. Okay, so because I'm the founder of this thing, oh, I didn't tell you that. I was the first faculty director of University 101, and this thing is still going 50 years later, and it's stronger than ever. And so, like the founding mothers and fathers of NETA, somebody knew something about the secret sauce of sustaining and institutionalizing innovation. So, I want to know, what are you going to do for your next 50 years? All right. I hope you will be, you are thinking about that. Okay. Now, I want to repeat something I asked, I don't know, whenever it was, sometime earlier in this century. When I met with you before at Woodstock, I asked if there were any faculty in the audience. And I want to ask that again. Are there any faculty in the audience? Okay. Okay, good. All right. So you have some access to this experience. Okay. I started out as an adjunct. I like to say I've done every job in the academy. I started out as an adjunct part-time, retired at the rank of distinguished professor at the university. So it's okay. So are there any chief academic officers here? Is there anybody that serves in an office of the chief academic officer? Nobody. Okay. Remember what I said earlier that Vernon Jordan said, if you ain't in the room, you ain't part of the action. There's some very important people that transfer students who aren't in your room, okay? I want to invite you to think about who you're going to get in this room in the next 50 years. And I'll come back to that. But I'm really glad that you all are here because, sometimes we admit students that we just take them in, take their hopes and dreams and their money, and we do nothing for them, all right? That's not happening with you. So that's a good thing. All right, so that aspect of NETA, that is a continuing practice and tradition. Now, I wanted to just say something about myself. I am a native New Englander. I grew up on what some call the Gold Coast of Connecticut in Fairfield County. I went to a session this morning until I was interrupted. In Fairfield County, you have somebody here from Sacred Heart. There she is. And I want to apologize to you for getting a phone call in your session, because I was really getting into what you were saying. And anyway, it wasn't my stockbroker, but I needed to take it. So anyway, I grew up in Connecticut. And do you know what counterdependency means in adolescence and traditional age college students? I'm back in the psychiatric clinic again. Counterdependence is when you want to do exactly the opposite of what the people on whom you are dependent want you to do, okay? So my father had gone to Dartmouth, that's in New England, okay? So I was supposed to go to Dartmouth. I would have been a legacy. He said, I can get you in there, okay? I don't think he would have bought me in, but I don't know that he could have got me in. But anyway, so he wanted me to be in New England? I don't want to go in New England. I had to go somewhere else. I was counterdependent. So I went out to Ohio. I left Connecticut in 1961, and I've never lived in New England again. I thought about coming back, but there was something called the Vietnam War. And I got drafted when I was in graduate school, and the Air Force, in its infinite wisdom, sent me to South Carolina, where I spent 32 years. All right, so if you went to a college, well, probably none of you went to a college as an undergraduate. They didn't have any transfer students. That's a unique distinction I have. But if you weren't a transfer student, and I'm going to ask you then, how do you get empathy for what transfer students are experiencing? Most of the people that run America's colleges and universities are people like me who they were not transfer students. I give a lot of speeches, and I often ask how many were transfer students. Very few. Okay, it's like asking the same question: how many of you that run America's colleges and universities, how many of you went to college on federal financial aid? Very few. Which is one of the reasons financial aid shops are run like sweatshops, because the leaders never had to ask for financial aid. Okay, they don't have any empathy. All right. So how many of you were transfer student, undergraduate transfer students somewhere? How many of you were transfer? Okay, so maybe a third of you. That's a much higher proportion than I normally see. So naturally, I talked to Carolyn about transfer. She lived it. She has empathy. Okay, she's turned it into a career. I did not acquire any empathy as a college student, but after I got drafted and out of the military and credentialed and got a real job, I got my first job after college, after the Air Force. I was teaching in a 4-year public women's college in South Carolina. And I got fired my second year there for my civil rights activities. And I got a job immediately after that at the University of South Carolina, where I spent 32 years. And you know what they do to new faculty or new staff? You know what they do. What happens to you when you're brand new in an institution? They give you every crap job in the university. They put you on all these committees, and they dump stuff on you because you have no power or autonomy. And so my second year at USC, I was put on a committee that gave me my first insight into transfer students. It was a committee designed to do something. I hope you all have this, you baccalaureate level places. I hope you all have a bachelor's degree that'll take anybody with any credits and apply all the credits to the bachelor's degree, all of them, no questions asked, as long as they're C or better. Okay, these are called bachelors of arts in interdisciplinary studies or bachelor of general studies. How many of you have degrees like that? Oh my gosh, you got to get with it. This is a major channel of upward mobility for transfer students. Okay, there are plenty of places that have these degrees. They are for people who've moved around a lot, accumulated a lot of credits, and they don't, because of their age and their financial circumstances, they don't have time to go back and start and go again. Okay, so anyway, I got put on a committee to design that kind of a degree. And to do that, I had to learn why in the world wasn't the University of South Carolina accepting a single credit from any 2-year campus in South Carolina in 1972. What was it about those students that we didn't want to accept anything they had taken, even though the faculty in the 2-year colleges were accredited by the same accreditor that accredited me to teach at the 4-year university, just like NETA does for you. Okay, so we designed this degree. All you have to do to get the bachelor's degree, you have to spend your last year in residence. You have to take 30 hours at the 300 level or higher. You have to have a C average, and you have to have a program of study approved by 2 faculty advisors. Okay, so I have a son who did that degree, and he knew he wanted to be a home builder like his grandfather, but his father maybe wanted him to get a college degree. So he took business and philosophy. You ever met a home builder that's really a philosopher, but he's also good with numbers? Okay. He got a Bachelor of Arts in interdisciplinary studies. He wasn't a transfer student. Okay, so that was the first thing. Then later in my career, from 1983 to 1996, I was the vice chancellor for academic affairs for 5 campuses at the University of South Carolina, where we didn't allow the word transfer to be used. We camouflaged it. We said, oh, our students don't transfer, they change schools. Well, nonsense. When they changed schools, they lost a lot of credits. They were transfer students, but we wanted to reassure ourselves that we weren't really treating them like transfer students. By the way, when I was in that job for 13 years, I had to learn, my boss had to teach me, the difference between anybody who's got a title vice in their job and someone who doesn't have the title vice, but they report to, like a chancellor and a vice chancellor, president, vice president. It's very simple. The vice is a mouse trying to act like a rat, and the guy or the woman without the vice is a rat trying to stay out of the trap. Okay? And the job of the vice, which I was for 13 years, was to keep my boss out of the trap, which I did. okay? And one of my responsibilities was to manage what we didn't call transfer amongst all these courses, including students who wanted to go to the mothership. We didn't call it that. As a matter of fact, we did one really good thing. We dropped from the lexicon any reference to the main campus, okay? We never talk about that. The main campus is the campus you happen to be at. So Carolyn is the chief transfer officer at the main campus of the University of Connecticut because she's at the Waterbury campus. That is the main campus, Carolyn. And you go back and say that, okay? All right, so the next thing that gave me a lot of empathy for first year transfer students, rather, was I was the designer of a process called Foundations of Excellence with a transfer focus that we've done with 68 colleges in the United States. And the very simple idea, it produces a plan to make transfer students successful. And you could access free. We have 9 standards of excellence on the website for the Gardner Institute. And they are standards that describe what it means to be a transfer sending or a transfer receiving institution of excellence. You could use these standards to evaluate yourselves and to argue for things that you're not doing that these standards would suggest. We've had only one institution in New England participate in this transfer redesign. Why? I don't know. And that is where you work, sir. That's Massachusetts Bay Community College. And we worked with that institution in 2010, 2011. Most recently, I have had the privilege around transfer of working with a woman who reminds me a lot of Carolyn. She is the founder of the Tulsa Area Higher Education Consortium, which is the latest and the newest consortium that has as its purpose the advance of transfer, okay? You ought to get on their website. They are doing amazing things to get 7 institutions in one geographic region to enhance transfer. And they got launched with a gift from a foundation. And I'm wondering how many of you could get gifts from foundations to launch a local consortium to support transfer. You do have foundations in New England. I know some of them, okay? As a matter of fact, I have the founder of one New England foundation who's on the board of directors for my nonprofit organization. Anybody here from Maine? Why? They don't have transfer students in Maine? Nobody here from Maine? Hey, you need to, drop leaflets from crop dusters over Maine and get her to the next meeting. I'm going to talk to this woman is Wendy Alt. She's the CEO of the Melmac Foundation. And they invest in stuff that supports transfer students. So, think about it. Anyway, so check out the Tulsa Higher Education Consortium. If New England is where consortia were birthed. This is a New England concept. And you have a number of them in New England, but I don't know any in New England that the sole purpose is to focus on transfer. Maybe it's time. What do you think? Okay. Now, the other thing, and you could have this experience too, the Gates Foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates, let me speak correctly, they awarded the nonprofit organization that Betsy Barefoot and I founded a grant in 2016. They gave us 9 months to undertake a study of the transfer landscape. And we convened 53 experts on this topic, and we took what they gave us and we put it in this book. I don't derive a cent from this book, ladies and gentlemen, but this is a terrific handbook of the current thinking on what it would take to advance transfer in the United States. It's published by Stylus. In your program book, Carolyn very thoughtfully put what do you call it, Carolyn? A QR, so that you could, I'm a man of the 20th century. So anyway, there are some wonderful thinkers in here. I'm in here for a brief bit, but there's some really good thinkers. And I commend this to you. And I'm going to share with you an argument that what a writer like Carolyn would call a thesis that we built this book around, okay? Because it's one I'd like you to consider. Okay, so now I want to make a confession that some of you may know. How many of you know what the first year experience is? You heard of the first year experience? You know what that is? You have a first year experience, something at your campus? You do, okay. Do you know who created that? Oh, that's interesting. You're listening to him, okay? Or many of you are. Okay, so why, I did that in 1982, but I wasn't thinking about transfer students. I was discriminating against the largest undergraduate population in the United States. John, why did you ignore them? I do not know. I honestly do not know. Even if I could do my whole life over again, not marry the first two women, I would redo that conference and I would focus on transfer students as well. But I didn't do that. We've had 42 annual first-year experience conferences. We have over 100,000 people attend those. Okay. I ignored the transfer students. I'm really embarrassed about that. I could have come up with some language, some terminology to get people talking about it, like we did the first year experience. Everybody uses that terminology. They don't always mean the same thing by it, but it's in wide use. Why didn't I establish a national center to focus on transfer students? I don't know, because I didn't think about it. Well, anyway, this founding a center, folks. Have you ever, I got over here, Carolyn made me move it because she thought it interfered with the aesthetics. I have a roller bag with wheels on it. Why didn't one of you take a piece of luggage and put wheels on it? You'd be rich. You could do anything you wanted. Why didn't you think of putting water in a bottle? It costs more per ounce than petroleum, okay? But you didn't. But I thought of something that nobody else thought of. I thought, why don't we get people together? Like somebody 50 years ago thought of, getting people in New England together to talk about transfer. That's a water bottle moment. That's a roller bag moment. All right, so there is, though, a woman, I was telling Carolyn about it this morning, who had this roller bag moment and decided to create a national center to focus on transfer students, okay? Why didn't I do that? I don't know, but I didn't, okay? And actually, there are two women that did this, Benita Jacobs and Janet Marling. They're at the University of North Georgia, and they founded something called the National Institute for the Study of Transfer Students. And they are doing great things to advance the profession. And we're going to get your organization connected with them, okay? Because you need partners and allies. So there are a lot of things I didn't do, just like there's a lot of things you didn't do. But you know what? It doesn't matter what you didn't do. What matters is what you do going forward, all right? So I urge you, you know what? You have any idea of anything that you don't know that anybody else has ever thought of? It could be your water bottle moment. You've all got that capacity. We have a saying in my organization, if John can do it, anybody can do it. Seriously. And my 17-year-old grandson, he's already got that figured out. And he tells me he is the coolest guy on the planet. And he keeps saying to me, Papa John, you don't get it. You don't get it. By the way, who's here from Trinity in Hartford? I need to talk to you. No. My grandson has been encouraged to look at Trinity. So, okay, all right. He's a winner, unlike me. 17, when I was 17, God, I got academic probation my first semester in college, almost flunked out, didn't have a first year experience. So, folks, I'm serious. The argument here, oh, wait a minute, I went too far. Again, that's too far. What you are responsible for, you are implementers of an unjust system. It's incredibly unjust. And you have got a man who's going to speak to you, I think tomorrow, Doug Shapiro, who's the CEO of the National Clearinghouse, who will really give you, I'm not going to do the data. I'm going to give you one data set here to prove my point, and of why it's an unjust system. And folks, it's an unjust system. Here's the best piece of data. 80% of two-year college students, entering students, tell us their goal is to attain a bachelor's degree. Over 6 years, only 15% are attaining that goal. There's no other sector of American higher education that is performing that poorly, okay? Can we not do better than that as a country? We put a person on the moon in 1957. Can we not design a more effective higher education system? This is shameful. I am really embarrassed about this. I'm proud of many things. I'm a patriotic veteran, seriously, but I'm not proud of this, okay? So question always is, who is responsible? And I'm arguing that, we're all responsible for this unjust system. So if we were to want to change this, the first thing we have to do, other than saying we all have some responsibility, is to look at how we frame transfer, how we understand it, literally how we define it. That's where the American higher ed system has got this wrong. That's the thesis of this book, okay? The thesis is that the way we're defining transfer is not working. It's not promoting and facilitating significant transfer degree aspirational attainment. because we have framed transfer as a, quote, stage of development. We think of it as a transition. We think of it as a phase, okay? I was talking to Carolyn this morning, and she remembers her transfer the way you would define it, the application, the review of transcripts, but she would tell you, right, I'm not putting words in your mouth, that her transfer experience is really what happened to her after, it was before. Why did she want to leave a perfectly good liberal arts college? What was her experience there as a future transfer student? She didn't know she was going to be a transfer student. And then what was her experience after she went through the bureaucratic transitions to admit her to another institution? We got it all wrong, folks. Transfer is the totality of the educational experience and everything that's involved in the educational experience at the sending and the receiving institution. You got it? It's not just the transaction that all of you manage. You are necessary, but you are not sufficient. So if we really want to improve transfer, we have to look at that whole pipeline. It's a pipeline issue. And right now, the students are dropping out of that pipeline. We're having the academic equivalent of the Great Resignation. And Doug Shapiro, I'm sure, will tell you about the worst decline in 50 years. That's particularly in two-year colleges, which is, it's a disaster, okay? So it has everything to do with how we define this, okay? So this is a, I don't know if you can see this, all right, look, there are 5 columns here. One's called pre-enrollment, that you experience before you go to your first institution. And you experience the first institution, like Carolyn did it, I won't tell. And then she went through the bureaucratic business of the transfer mechanics. And then she ended up at the second institution. She stopped there. She finished at the second institution, okay? So what you folks do is you're here, okay? But you're not here much, and you're not over there much, okay? We got to get you in here more and over here more. But you can't do that alone, okay? Because it's both on the sending and the receiving levels that you determine what makes a successful college student, all right? So, all right, I've said to you that I'm arguing instead that transfer is the entire, come on. I'm not going to do all this. You've heard, you understand. This is all about social justice and the cost to students and their families and our government. Okay, this is not quick enough. You got another one of these? All right, or maybe you could advance this for me. That'd be wonderful. Okay, so I talked to, this is about the Great Resignation. They've heard that. They don't need any more of that. Will you advance it, please? Yeah, thank you. Okay, now let's look at, and by the way, I have, this is one of the things I drew from something I wrote in this. There's a set of recommendations in this book about what we could do to improve transfer. Not necessarily all of them, but some of them. Okay, first of all, you have to make transfer a priority. You have to talk about it more. You got to get your leaders to talk about it. It needs to be on the CEO's cheat sheet when he or she goes to the Rotary Club, okay? You got to make everybody aware, if you're at a baccalaureate institution, what proportion of the students that their transcripts would reveal who got BAs last year did not get the whole treatment at the University of Connecticut at Storrs, okay? I don't know, what is it there, Carolyn? It's probably pushing 50%. I don't know. Maybe? Okay, well, it's substantial. But most of us who work in baccalaureate level institutions, we don't really, that's not a number we carry around with us, okay? Because these students are invisible. They don't have, in the best of the tradition of New England, remember the Scarlet Letter, Hester Prynne, the letter A, we don't stamp a T on their foreheads, okay? So the first thing you have to do, you have to talk about it more. You have to do everything you can to leverage this as a priority. You work for people who have the ability to do that. You have to design the transfer, so you know this concept of design based on the end in mind. What's the end? The end is producing a successful college student. What do you have to do to start a successful college student out? That's a function of the thing that is most likely to prevent student progress initially in college are what are called gateway courses. This is the one common experience other than food and parking and registration and financial aid. And we are failing gateway college, gateway course students in the hundreds of thousands. And when you disaggregate that data, Those students that are failing, they do not look like me. Okay, well, they're more likely to be men than women, but other than that, they don't look like me. So first thing you got to fix is gateway courses. You have to fix advising. You have to fix orientation. Still, the majority of community colleges in this country do not mandate orientation. Okay, the community college in this country that has the highest first and second year retention rate is also our newest community college, the Charles and Stella Gutman Community College in the City University of New York. They not only don't have 1 hour of orientation or 1/2 day or 1 day, they require, imagine this, 10 days of orientation for every new student. If you don't complete 10 days, you don't start classes, okay? They're going to make you a successful college student, all right? So orientation is critical. Advising. You can look at a lot of community colleges where advising is not required at all. You can register without talking to a soul and make all the dumb choices you want to make, okay? Because you are perfectly prepared to make dumb choices, just like I was when I started college. So I got 3 Fs, 2 Ds, and 1 A. What would you think my A was? Come on, look at me. No, first year experience hadn't been invented. There was no first year experience. Huh? Physical education. I was a varsity athlete. Okay. All right. So you got to start right, and then when you after Carolyn transferred, something had to happen to her in the major she chose in terms of the teaching and advising and how they integrated her into the major. And she will tell you about something that she didn't get that they do now at Storrs, which is a good thing. All right. Thirdly, you have to make better use of data to understand who your students are. This was the theme from the woman from Sacred Heart University this morning that I only heard part of, and she's absolutely right. That you have to better understand who these students are. And yet, most important thing with your data, you constantly got to disaggregate your data. Don't give your boss aggregate numbers. Doesn't mean anything. You got to disaggregate those numbers. I want to know how many men, how many women, how many Pell students, how many blacks, whites, you name it. Okay, you got to disaggregate the data. Your real story as an institution is your data. You follow the data, you know your story. Okay, all right. So everything you have to do is got to have some connection to data. I would recommend that you do something that most people think is like drinking arsenic, and that is conduct a voluntary self-study. The very phrase self-study gets your pulse rate up. Okay, until you study everything you're doing for your undergraduate students that relates to degree completion, including transfer, you don't really understand how this system works. That's the kind of process that I've been working with. We had about 300 institutions do voluntary self-studies. And what we know is that an institution that studies itself thoroughly and creates an action plan to redesign the transfer experience or the first year experience, and if they implement the action plan to a high degree, they're going to stunning outcomes. We academics, we're great at planning. We're lousy on the execution, really lousy. We'd much rather think great thoughts, like how many angels dance on the head of a pin, okay, than actually implement anything, okay? We got to get better at that. Okay, then what happened to the slide? Okay, it always leaves me like my first 2 Y's when I, okay. You need to intentionally involve faculty in the discussion, because one of the things that's one of the greatest obstacles to transfer is what we call discretionary review. You know what discretionary review is? It's when some mortal sits down and looks at my transcript and decides either my courses are equivalent or not. That's where prejudice kicks in, capriciousness, inconsistency, unfairness. You need to design a system that minimizes discretionary review. You understand why? Sure you do, okay? All right, but to the extent that we're going to continue to have discretionary review, you've got to involve the faculty. They've got to become a lot more aware of the data on your transfer students. They've got to be helped to better understand them and appreciate them and understand why they matter. Wonderful chapter in here, 2 guys from the Columbia University Community College Research Center. I don't know how many of you know that or use their work, look at their literature. These folks have really got it together. These 2 guys, John Fink and Davis Jenkins, wrote a wonderful chapter in here on something we all have, barriers, the barriers to transfer students. And barriers are policies, they are practices, and they are people and offices, okay? Yesterday, I visited a campus that will remain nameless, and there is a total lack of understanding at this campus about a rule. Some of them think they have a rule, some of them think they don't have a rule, but the rule some of them think they have is preventing them from doing something that if they didn't have that rule, they'd have far more transfer students, okay? Rules are creations of human beings. We make them, and we almost never go back and revisit them. And one of the things that I would recommend, and I'll get to this in just a minute, is that you do a policy audit. A policy audit is where you undertake a policy audit to determine the extent of prejudice against transfer students. So what you do is you look at your rules for admissions, deadlines for application, costs for application, if there are, deadline acceptance, recognition of prior credit, and learning, and compare how you treat new students, traditional non-transfers, and transfers. Okay, but don't stop there. Look at your financial aid policies and see how you treat transfer students versus non-transfer students. See how you determine eligibility for on-campus housing. I heard at this conference about an institutional policy that discriminates against commuter students for on-campus housing and gives preference to students who don't live locally. You know what that means? You know what the consequence of that means? That means if you have that policy, you're going to have more people who look like me, okay? If you're discriminating against your local students who could afford through aid to live on campus, you're denying them of one of the best predictors of who's going to get a degree. We know that residential status is a predictor or not a predictor for bachelor's degree attainment. Okay, so eligibility for on-campus housing. How about priority for class registration? Think of your own, you all have a scheme, as the British would say, a scheme for who gets to register first, last, whatever. Where are transfer students on that? Availability of required programs, elective, or how you determine what's an elective versus a required experience. Academic advising. Do you have some distinct form of advising for transfer students? Or do you have generalists that do this? How well have you thought that through? What about eligibility for internships? Huge discrimination here against transfer students, okay? At many colleges, the internship opportunities start as early as the freshman year. I've got a grandson right now who's finishing his first year, and he's going into it. He's got an internship with Tesla this summer. He's a transfer student. He wouldn't have that. And we know that one of the things that leverages employment opportunities are internships, right? So you got to look at who can get these things. You know, I thought I've heard of everything, but not too long ago, I heard of an R1 that will remain nameless that will not allow a transfer student to hold an office in a university-funded student organization in their first term of admission. Can you imagine that? That's a lawsuit waiting to happen. What could possibly be the rationale that would prevent a transfer student from serving as a student leader? That's another way that negatively biases non-transfers over transfer students. And all those are rules made by human beings like us. And then, of course, the extent to which you have specific offices and programs, like a transfer center. Okay, another place to look is your website. For admissions, all these categories, and compare the references for non-transfer versus transfer. See how much real estate, website real estate, is owned by transfer students. My wife says, if you can't find out what you're looking for in less than 3 clicks, you don't have any status. How many clicks does it get at your place to find out this information? Peer-to-peer relationships between people at different functional levels and geographically, proximity-wise institutions, hugely important. Other corrective actions. Carolyn, are we going to give this PowerPoint to people? We can, yeah, I'd like you to do that. All right, because I want to get to just a couple of other points. I've talked about discretionary review. What's going to happen if we don't fix this, okay? Part of what I'm saying here is going to happen, is already happening, and I personally want to see it happen. Folks, the transfer system was originally created because when we created community colleges after World War II, we created them as an outgrowth of local school districts. And we created them for certain types of students that we didn't want in bachelor's level institutions. That's been known, the research refers to that as the cooling out function. We literally didn't want certain students in our bachelor's institutions. So we put them in community colleges, okay? Then when we finally opened that up, we bolted on this thing to community colleges to permit those students to leave. But you see, originally the community colleges were not designed to send students anywhere. There was a word used to describe, and the accreditors blessed this. They were part of this crime. Community colleges offered what were called terminal programs. Do you have the word terminal anywhere in your catalog? Do you tell students about anything you offer as being terminal? No, you don't. But we used to, believe me. Okay, not so long ago, we had all kinds of terminal programs. Who are we talking about? We're talking about students who don't look like me, who got in these terminal programs. Okay, and we bolted on this system to try to correct that, but we haven't been very successful. So one of the options here, ladies and gentlemen, I refer to this as the nuclear option, is, and we're already seeing this happen, and that is to evolve community colleges to baccalaureate degree granting institutions, even on a limited basis. We're never going to fix this without permitting more baccalaureate degree completion for community colleges. And of course, the four-year colleges are terrified of this. They don't want to do it, okay, and they fight it, all right? But that's breaking down. Another thing that's happening is that private institutions now, many of them are more flexible and accommodating to transfer than our public institutions. This doesn't fail to amaze me, but it's the reality. Cross-border institutions, I'm not talking about here in New England, Canada, and the United States, that's become much more complicated. But do any of your states have cross-border arrangements with New York or Pennsylvania, or even within New England? Can Maine students go to New Hampshire institutions and pay in-state fees? Huh? No? Well, there are a number of parts of the country where these are reciprocal cross-border arrangements to promote mobility across state lines. For-profit institutions, you better believe, I was in a session about a week ago where I heard a spokesperson for a for-profit college indicate that their primary market was Black women. And my spinal radar went up, and when I asked them what they knew about these students or what they were doing especially for them, I couldn't get an answer from the person. 1 week later, I read a story in the New York Times about how this institution is facing a major class action lawsuit filed by Black students. Okay, so the for-profits, they want these students, but anyway. There's no question that accreditors are ultimately going to be more assertive about dealing with this. Okay, Carolyn, 2 more minutes to look 50 years out. Okay, thank you. I don't know what I would have done if you said no, but anyway. By the way, I probably would have deferred. But one thing I hope you'll ultimately consider, our organization has a grant right now from the ECMC Foundation, and we're partnering with a group called SHIO, which is the State Higher Education Executive Officers Association. We're working with 4 states, none of them in New England, sorry, that's the next grant. But what we're trying to do is to create a comprehensive state system of excellence where all the public, all the private, 2-year and 4-year would come together and design a state system of transfer. And we're trying to develop this in North Carolina, South Carolina, Colorado, and Washington. So stay tuned. We got another 1.5 years of this, and then we're going to disseminate nationally what these 4 states produced to try to do that. You have a lot of similarities here in New England. That's the underlying assumption of this. Are you ultimately, could you see this association encouraging even one state to try to develop a statewide system of transfer excellence? Ultimately, you ought to do it for the whole region. Think about a game changer. If you could design a 6-state system of excellence for transfer, we have developed, the Gardner Institute has developed a set of standards for a state system of transfer excellence. They're free. You don't have to pay us anything. So here you are at your 50th, and you're hungry. You're going to have lunch. Is it time for a big goal? How can you, typically anniversaries, I keep asking my wife, let's have a re-up ceremony, let's do it again, okay? And she says, John, you just want to have a party, okay? Well, but to reaffirm the vows, should you be reaffirming the principles? Or should some of the principles be new? Should you do some new things in your next 50 years? I think I'm thinking, I got a fantasy here. This is a late middle-age fantasy. What if all of you got together with chief academic officers in this region and built a coalition with them? Oh my God, what you could get done? Okay, so Transfer fundamentally, folks, is about collaborating. If you look at it as a way to make you more competitive, that's not the right way. That you got to look at it as a way to make you more collaborative, because that's the key to your ongoing viability. So, can you pilot or organize some new demonstration models of effective practices? Carolyn has got an idea about that she's going to lay on you. Okay. Aren't you, Carolyn? Yeah. Okay. So now you all love your accreditor, right? I was at your accreditors meeting in December. It was wonderful. It's the first in-person talk I've done in 2 years. Okay. Why don't you go to your accreditor and propose a partnership with NETA? Okay. That you would jointly work with NETA to do something to facilitate enhanced transfer in the New England region. The worst they could say is no. They might say yes. Okay. Accreditors, folks, the 6 no longer regional accreditors are under a lot of pressure to demonstrate to the United States Department of Education that they are more serious about monitoring quality assurance. Okay. They need you. They need good ideas, and they don't have all of them. What kinds of new dissemination models, partnerships, like consortia, could you launch here? Could you have a New England consortium where you could formalize this association into a not-for-profit organization, seek foundation funding, okay, and really ramp up the game? If Gardner can do it, you can do it. Okay, what about sponsoring some research? You have a number of doctoral degree, understatement, you have some of the most distinctive doctoral degree granting institutions in the country with scholars who could be partnering with you, because you've got what they want. You have research subjects. You could be helping them do research on something that you need, which is more research-based outcomes on transfer. What about approaching foundations? I've meant you need a list from me of New England foundations? I know who they are. Okay, I know who funds student success work here. And there are also national foundations. National foundations, like organizations like NETA, because you give them access to multiple institutions. They don't want to give any one of your institutions a grant. That's small fry. They want scale. Okay, you've got scale. Okay, but you're not using it, but you could. So you've got a lot of choices, and I think you matter to this region's future. And I think you could be an even more significant player. So, as General MacArthur said, or he claimed he said it, I shall return. And I'm going to return in August to Shelburne, Vermont for vacation. So thank you very much, all of you. Have a great rest of anniversary celebration. And I appreciate your hospitality.
So thank you, John, so much. And we give this to all of our presenters. So we just want to present this to you, which is our certificate of appreciation for you being here. Since we ran a little bit over in this session, John does have a follow-up session that's going to run at 2 o'clock. So if you want to actually save any of your questions that you do have for him, save them for that session at 2. And we also have information about the transfer experience book. If you're interested in that, there is information in the Schedule agenda for that 2 o'clock session, if you're interested in looking that up right now. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.